Hi, I'm Christina Morgan. Welcome to the West of Narrative History. This is part 5 in chapter 3, Aegean Civilizations. In part 1, we went over Minoan civilization. Part 2, Mycenaean. Part 3, we talked about the Aegean Dark Age, the Homeric era, and the rise of the Hellenic civilization. Part 4, we talked about the rise of Athens and Sparta. And today, the last section we're going to talk about is the Persian War, or Persian Wars. The Persian Wars are, it says, crucible of civilization. It's kind of a turning point or a major impact on these city-states in Greece. The Persian Empire fills up the vacuum that's left by the declining Sumer and all those city-states that decline. The Persian Empire just sweeps in when Babylonia and all those city-states kind of start falling apart. It just sweeps in and fills in that area. The empire stretches from Egypt, the borders of India, to the Hindu Kush, so it's a large spread empire. And by 500 BCE, many of the Greek city-states of the coast of Asia are under barbarian control. Remember, barbarians are what they call the non-Greeks. A revolt against the Persian authority happens in Ionia with the assistance of Athens, and the Persians are very harsh in how they put this down. They are not going to tolerate revolt. So after they crush the revolt, Darius the First is determined to punish all the cities that aid the rebels, because he wants to make sure that no one gets the idea that they're going to keep fighting the Persians. He wants to keep tight control over the Persian Empire and those they've conquered. So in 490 BCE, the Persians send 20,000 men to the plain of a place called Marathon, over 20 miles from Athens. But they're defeated by this new democracy of Athens. And a man actually runs from the plains of Marathon all the way back to Athens. The actual distance is the length of a marathon. That's where we get the word marathon. It comes from this actual event. The loss at Marathon triggers a much larger and more comprehensive invasion, because Darius isn't going to just take it overland and by sea from the north. The Greeks say the invading force launched, because Darius' son launches this, launched by Xerxes the First, contains 1 million men. This is probably exaggerated. He probably doesn't really send 1 million men, but Darius has died. His son has taken over. He is determined as well to punish the Greeks, and he sends a very large army. So 31 of these city-states pledged to stand against the Persians, and the Greeks are finally forced to work together. Remember, we talked about before the geography, economic rivalries, the lack of resources created an inability to unify. Well, finally, they have a common enemy, and this gives them a reason to work together. They work together, and one of the big battles is Thermopylae. It is a mountain pass, and it forces the Persian numbers to be reduced because they have to, funnel through this pass, and so it kind of makes their numbers not as important. This is the movie, the 300, because in the end, the Persians, one of the Greeks are betrayed. One of their members tells the Persians how to get around them, and they come behind, and in order to let the rest of the Greek army escape, Leonidas and his 300 Spartans stand against the Persians to fight them off while the rest of the army escapes. And so this is the Battle of Thermopylae. It's a famous, self-sacrificing fight to the death of the Spartans. So Athens, under the leadership of Themistocles, had built a navy in the late 480s. They had some extra money, and they had talked about distributing it among the people, but Themistocles said, let's build a navy, and that turns out to be a really well thought out plan of his. So the Persians are defeated in the waters of Salamis. So now the Persians have had this they've been defeated in the water. They've not done real well on land. So the conclusion the Greeks come to is that everything about the Greeks is just superior to everybody else, and that there's no limit to what they can do. That's what the Greeks walk away from this thinking. Here's a sculpture of a Spartan warrior. And this is a timeline of the rise of Hellenic civilization. You can see that in your book. So, revisiting this key question, Herodotus is the creator of history as a field of study. He says that the Greeks won because they were free men fighting for their homeland, while the Persians were slaves fighting for a domineering master. So, if you're fighting for your home, you're more motivated than if you're fighting for even money, but certainly more than if you're a slave fighting for someone who's conquered you and ordered you to do it. But should we beware of demonizing the East at the expense of the West? So when you're talking about a war, how do you decide who the quote good guys or bad guys are in a war? Are there really how do we decide which side was sort of just or unjust in a war? Can you really make those determinations? Is there, I mean, sometimes, yes, there is clear evil, but sometimes when they're fighting over land, each side has their own story. So, should we demonize the East at the expense of the West? And how did the West learn from the East? How are they more closely connected than one might otherwise suppose? We have this idea that the West created Western civilization, the Greeks created all this Western civilization, but as you can see throughout this chapter, there's a lot of intermingling between the East and the West through trade, through war, through conquering. So there's a lot of intermingling. So the West is very influenced by the East. So while we call it Western civilization, there is a lot of intermixing. There is no sort of pure culture. Maybe the Spartans are a pure culture because they don't let any outside ideas in. But for as far as the rest of us are concerned, we're influenced by the people around us and the ideas of the people around us. The key takeaway you want to get here is where does Western civilization come from? And that's the end of chapter 3, and I hope you learned a little bit about Western civilization.